Hey, what do you know? This is the Melbourne Live show, and how's everyone doing? And so today, I want to share with you something that I came across um, recently as I was doing my reading. And actually, this is something that I kind of learned during my university days. And the thing that I learned was this thing called sunspot. Now, in case you're not familiar with the sunspot theory, essentially what it says is that, or rather, how sunspots happen is that during the course of the sun's um, movement itself, there are certain magnetic forces that causes certain parts of the sun to explode, so to speak. And as a result of that, we can actually see some of these explosions, and scientists call them sunspots. Now, it was in the 18th century that an astronomer, a long forgotten astronomer, actually discovered through the collection of data that there was a correlation between the number of sunspots and the stock market performance. Yes, in the 18th century. So there was this correlation between number of sunspots and market performance. So as the number of sunspots decreases, the number of the performance of the market also fall. And so one way to explain this is that because of the reduction of sunspots, it actually resulted in more crops failure, and because of that crop failure itself, it kind of spin off into a series of adverse events, and one of which, of course, is the the stock market performance. And it is interesting to see that recently NASA actually predicted that there is a significant decline in the number of sunspots. So what does that mean to us? Well, one way to look at that is that a recession, a huge recession is coming. Now, before you call me Chicken Little, let's look at what's happening around us at this point in time. Yes, we are faced with a health crisis around the world, and I would say that at this point in time, we kind of gotten used to this health crisis itself. But the fact is that this health crisis has taken the economies down, and has resulted in a huge disruption of our life. And as a result, that it has caused many industries to struggle with the functioning of those industries. Of a particular one that we saw, it's of course the travel industry, right? Immediately because of COVID, many people were restricted from flying, and the fact that they were restricted from flying means that they would have to go through this process of, um, the travel industry would be first hit. And of course, once the industry was being hit, the subsequent set of industries like the retail that depend on the tourism, that dependent on tourists would also be impacted. And that, of course, lead to a trigger in the next round of cutbacks as well. So how do we deal with this now? Before we get into that, I just like to kind of give you an idea of what exactly is a recession. Now, technically speaking, when we economists say that the economy is in a recession, what that means is that the growth in the economy has fallen by two consecutive quarters, which means, for example, in second quarter of this year and in third quarter of this year, we have seen a negative growth. And once you have two consecutive negative growth, you are in what we call a technical recession. Now, why do we call it a technical recession? Because that is technically speaking how we define a recession itself. But the impact that is going to be felt by the people would actually come later. And there is one very interesting real life example of how recession works and what does it mean and how do we feel the impact itself. The story or this example was actually brought up by Paul Krugman in his book Peddling Prosperity. And in the book itself, what Paul Krugman said was what Paul Krugman was using this example as an illustration of what exactly does a recession looks like. So it goes something like this. There is a what they call a babysitting co-op, right? And so that this co-op is actually, there are a number of members within this co-op itself. Now, each member is actually issued a slip, and that slip would entitle them to, I think, an hour of babysitting. And so when they need someone to babysit for them, they would actually need to, put that slip out. So it's not an exchange of money itself, but it's actually using that slip to kind of exchange for the services of a babysitter. And so the whole thing about that is that there is a fixed number of slip that were circulating in this babysitting co-op. Now, what happened was when they started thinking that, oh, let's go out less because we might need the slip we might need the slip for babysitting a couple of months down the road because we are going to be expecting that we are going to need the babysitting services. And if we use the slip now, what's going to happen is that, we might run into a situation whereby when we need it and we don't have it, then that will be an issue. And so as a result of that, people start holding back their intent of wanting to procure the services of a babysitter. And so everyone start holding back the script. And because of that, there wasn't enough script to go around in the system itself. And so technically speaking, the whole babysitting co-op ran into what they call a recession. Now, how do we apply that in a real case scenario? And well, a real case scenario right now that we are facing is the following, right? Right now, everyone is either in or anticipating that the recession is going to affect them. And rightfully so, right? Because as we can see, the first wave that was being hit were the travel industry. And the next phase that was the next group of people that were being hit were actually the retail people. And that's going to escalate to the next group of people. And then next group of people are going to be people who produce or people who supply to the retailers, for example. So, like for example, in Singapore, you know, over the last couple of weeks, we have seen the closing down of a 100-over-year-old departmental store called Robinson's. And the fact that a store like this could close down because of the pandemic was largely because they were dependent on tourist market rather than the local market to patronize the store. And because of the non-existence of the tourist market for an extended period of time now, the department store just could not, go on indefinitely. And as a result of that, they started closing one store, and even that was not going to be enough to save them. And so, unfortunately, they had to go under. And so now we're seeing this group of people who are being hit. And of course, the suppliers who are supplying to this departmental store are definitely going to be hit as well, because some of these suppliers may not have the network nor the financial muscles to be able to put their goods in front of the very audience that they want to reach out to. And as a result, that this is going to create a contraction for the next group of people. Now, what that means for most consumers or the rest of us is that we start to see that this recession is kicking in, and we're not quite sure when the economy is going to recover, and even if the economy recovers, how much of the picked up it's going to be come back to us, and if we are even going to see levels at pre-COVID days, right? So as a result of that, many of us start anticipating, and one of the most logical thing to do whenever we're faced with a possibility of a recession, it's of course to cut back in terms of our expenditure. Now, when we think about cutback in terms of our expenditure, let's look at what exactly do we expend on, right? So, and in one basket, it's actually goods and services that are consumables, right? So, consumables are things that we buy, that we consume, and that that consumption itself may not lead to any form of impact in our business. So, as an example, if I choose to continue with my Netflix subscription, right, the expenditure in that category itself is essentially for the purpose of entertainment. Now, if it's entertainment, what I am potentially going to see in terms of return, it's going to be, zero, right, in terms of my business. Because by consuming content on Netflix isn't going to help my business at all. It's not going to help me be able to get more clients. It's not able to help me get more contracts, for example, right? So that expenditure, it's purely a consumable. However, if I am going to look at the other category of expenditure, the other category of expenditure would be, for example, in the area of investment. Now, when we talk about investment, and in this context itself as a business, the investment could be, say, let's train our people, right? Let's equip our people, because now we have less activity, right? We have less client activity. So let's, instead of letting the time go to waste, let us channel some of those time and those effort into developing our people. So this is where we might be able to equip our people with the necessary skill set, tool set, as well as mindset to help them succeed in the near future or when the economy picks up. And that kind of expenditure is actually good because potentially we could benefit from that aspect of expenditure. So, as an example, the kind of expenditure that I have been putting in the last couple of months, one of course, it's in the area of investing in myself by equipping myself with better tools, better skill sets, better mindset, for example. So I have signed up for some courses. I have bought several books that I know is going to equip me with the knowledge and skill set to be able to execute on my work going forward itself. Right. So that's one aspect. The other aspect of investment has been in terms of the resources, right? So I'm always looking at how I could up my game in terms of my video, right? So how I could create a better, create a better setup, create a better, sound, audio, and video quality of my video itself. So those are the kind of investment I'm looking at because at some point in time, I'm able to make a recommendation in terms of what you could do if you want to bring your live streaming, or even if you're teaching online, what you can do to kind of bring it to the next level. And so that is another kind of expenditure. Now, the problem is that sometimes people are not discerning in terms of their expenditure itself. So, for example, when they think about, oh, we're going to be in a recession, or we are already in a recession, and so they cut back on their expenses. And by cutting back on their expenses, they are not being indiscriminate about it. And so, what happened is that they cut all sorts of expenditure, both the consumable type as well as the investment type. And what that means is that at the end of the day, of course, they are going to, when the economy picks up, they are going to be less adaptable and less ready compared to someone else who have been cutting back on consumables but investing on on areas where they could better themselves. And so as a result of that, you may come up with a situation whereby you cut back indiscriminately. And as a result of that, you kind of shortchange yourself. So yes, it might meet your goals in the short term because you reduce in terms of your costs. But in the long run, it's going to be hurting you. So over the next couple of days, what I would like to share with you would be, as a one person business, in building this 1%, 1 million all digital business, what are some of the areas that you can look at when it comes to investing, right? When it comes to expenditure, because do not cut back on the wrong type of expenditure. Yes, by all means, cut back on the consumables because that isn't going to pretty much value add your life at this point in time, and that isn't going to help you in any way, shape, and form for your business. But instead, focus on expending or spending on the aspect that would help you invest in either yourself or your business. And over the next couple of days, what I would like to do is to go a little deeper into what are the key things that you can expand and invest in yourself and in your business. All right. Now, if there is an area that you like me to cover, make sure you leave it in the comments below. Right. And if this video has been useful, make sure you give me a thumbs up, and because that would help other people find this video. That's how the algorithm works. And if you haven't already, go ahead and hit the subscribe button, because that way you will get more of such content when I go live. All right. And so with that, I am going to call it a night. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Bye bye.